The political and economic landscape continues to be shaped by a series of high-profile developments and shifting policies, with the current administration at the epicenter of several unfolding narratives. From sweeping economic decrees to direct corporate engagements and contentious budget realignments, the ripple effects are being felt across industries and communities, prompting both praise from allies and sharp criticism from opponents. A significant focus this week has been on the administration's aggressive economic policies, particularly its reliance on tariffs. President Donald Trump's America First economic policies are touted by the White House as having sparked trillions of dollars in new investment in U.S. manufacturing technology and infrastructure. The theoretical aim of these levies on imports is to incentivize firms to build manufacturing capabilities within the U.S., thereby sidestepping the tax burden. Indeed, scores of companies, including tech giants Apple and Nvidia, pharmaceutical companies Merck & Johnson & Johnson, and automakers Hyundai and Stellantis have reportedly pledged new investments in the U.S. Morris Cohen, a professor emeritus of manufacturing and supply chains at Duke University, noted to ABC News that the whole idea is to encourage reshoring of manufacturing and change the balance of trade. That could all have some positive impact. However, this policy remains fluid, injecting a layer of uncertainty for businesses. While the economy has largely shrugged off earlier recession forecasts, the latest round of tariff threats includes levies as high as 50% on dozens of countries, with 25% tariffs on key U.S. trade partners like Japan and South Korea. This has pushed the effective tariff rate for consumers to 20.6%, the highest since 1910, according to the Yale Budget Lab. Critics like Matthias Vernengo, a professor of economics at Bucknell University, express skepticism about the longevity of corporate commitments, suggesting that many firms may ultimately fall short given the on-again, off-again nature of the policy. He added it would be nice if he announced a tariff policy and stuck to it. But that's not what's happening. Moreover, recent court rulings in May have cast some tariffs into legal limbo, adding further unpredictability. Despite the volatility, tariffs have proven to be a substantial source of government revenue. Treasury Department data revealed approximately $27 billion in tariff-related tax revenue last month, bringing the year-to-date total to over $100 billion. Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, projects this revenue could exceed $300 billion by the end of 2025, amounting to nearly 1% of U.S. GDP. While this could help ease government deficits, Zandi cautioned against relying on this revenue long-term due to the policy's potential illegality or future presidential changes. On the inflation front, consumer prices rose 2.7% in June, a modest uptick, with tariffs contributing to price hikes in import-heavy categories like toys, clothes, and furniture. Vernengo anticipates tariffs will temporarily push up inflation, potentially pressuring the Federal Reserve to maintain elevated interest rates, which could risk an economic slowdown. Beyond tariffs, the administration's fiscal approach has drawn sharp condemnation from Capitol Hill. Representative Paul D. Itanco, in a July 19 statement, asserted that Republicans have gut government services and undermined the financial security of American families, citing its slash-and-burn approach to critical federal programs. The recently enacted Big Beautiful Bill reportedly includes the largest cuts to healthcare and food assistance in U.S. history. This week, a new rescissions package codified further cuts, canceling billions in already allocated funding. This includes $1.1 billion from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting (CPB), which supports NPR, PBS, and their 1,500 local affiliates. Tonko labeled this move a petty personal vendetta against his perceived enemies, arguing it disregards the vital services, including emergency alerts, provided by public broadcasting. The package also claws back nearly $8 billion in foreign aid, impacting the World Health Organization, refugee relief, and USAID nutrition initiatives. Tonko highlighted the dangerous precedent set by these actions, as Congress effectively cedes its constitutional power of the purse to the president, even on funds previously approved with bipartisan support. Adding another layer to the administration's direct engagement with the private sector, President Trump announced on social media this week that Coca-Cola had agreed to use real cane sugar in Coke in the United States, a move potentially influenced by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s concerns about high-fructose corn syrup and the obesity epidemic. However, a spokeswoman for Coca-Cola, Michelle Agnew, would not confirm any such agreements, stating only, "We appreciate President Trump's enthusiasm for our iconic Coca-Cola brand. More details on new innovative offerings within our Coca-Cola product range will be shared soon." The company later clarified on X that corn syrup is safe and has about the same number of calories per serving as table sugar. This exchange underscores the unique dynamic between the current White House and major corporations, highlighting the president's willingness to engage publicly on product formulations. It's worth noting that Coca-Cola already offers cane sugar sweetened options such as Mexican Coke and a kosher for Passover version. Amidst these economic and policy shifts, questions persist regarding the administration's broader public image and past associations. For instance, CNN has posed 5 big questions about Trump's ties to Epstein, indicating ongoing scrutiny into the president's prior relationships and their potential implications. As the administration presses forward with its distinctive approach to governance, the interplay between aggressive economic policies, significant budget reallocations, and direct presidential influence on corporate decisions continues to redefine the norms of American politics. The coming months will undoubtedly reveal the full extent of these policy impacts on the economy, public services, and the delicate balance of power as stakeholders from Wall Street to Main Street grapple with an ever-evolving landscape. In a week marked by high-stakes legal challenges and surprising corporate claims, former President Donald Trump has once again commanded headlines, launching a formidable $10 billion lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal over its reporting on Jeffrey Epstein. This dramatic new turn in the long-standing narrative surrounding Trump and media mogul Rupert Murdoch's empire. As reported by Reuters and The Hill on Saturday, July 19, 2025, underscores an intensifying battle over public perception and journalistic accountability. The lawsuit, stemming from an Epstein-related report, signals a significant escalation in the ongoing friction between the former president and a prominent media outlet, promising a protracted legal skirmish that could have far-reaching implications for press freedom and the boundaries of defamation claims. Simultaneously, Trump sparked a different kind of public discourse with a bold assertion regarding Coca-Cola. On Wednesday, July 16, he claimed on Truth Social that the beverage giant had agreed to switch from high-fructose corn syrup to cane sugar in its products sold in the U.S., declaring, "You'll see. It's just better." This statement, however, was quickly met with skepticism. NBC News reporting on Friday, July 18, highlighted that a Coca-Cola spokesperson did not confirm the president's assertion, leaving the veracity of the claim in doubt. More critically, health experts have largely debunked the notion that cane sugar offers a significant health advantage over corn syrup, a point that has given fact-checkers a wildly inaccurate brag, as noted by MSN. Dr. Dariush Mozaffarian, a cardiologist and director of the Food is Medicine Institute at the Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy at Tufts University, unequivocally stated, "Both high-fructose corn syrup and cane sugar are about 50% fructose, 50% glucose, and have identical metabolic effects. This means both sweeteners can equally elevate the risk for obesity, diabetes, high triglycerides, and high blood pressure." While corn syrup contains a slightly higher ratio of fructose, 55% fructose to 45% glucose, compared to cane sugar, the metabolic pathway remains largely the same. The primary concern, experts emphasize, lies with fructose, which is predominantly processed by the liver. Excess fructose is converted into triglycerides, a type of fat strongly linked to heart disease, and unlike glucose, fructose does not stimulate insulin production, which is crucial for signaling satiety. This can lead to increased consumption and, over time, insulin resistance and a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. Despite the minimal health distinction between the two sweeteners, Dr. Melanie J., a professor of medicine and population health at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine, conceded that a marginal difference such as a 5% reduction in fructose intake on a population level might offer some benefit. Yet she underscored the overarching message, but it's not like table sugar is a health food. Added sugar in whatever form should be limited. This sentiment aligns with broader public health recommendations. A 20-ounce original Coca-Cola, for instance, contains 240 calories and 65 grams of added sugars, significantly exceeding the dietary guideline recommendation for teens and children to limit added sugars to less than 50 grams per day. Sugary sodas, regardless of their specific sweetener, are categorized as ultra-processed foods due to their added sugars, artificial colors, and flavorings, a category that Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has long opposed. Kennedy, in a statement Friday, welcomed the news of a potential switch to cane sugar, asserting that Americans deserve access to the same natural foods that other countries enjoy, and the president is delivering that. However, experts like Dr. J are quick to distinguish between added sugars and the natural sugars found in whole foods like fruit, which come packaged with beneficial fiber, vitamins, and minerals that slow sugar absorption and promote fullness. Beyond the health debate, the potential taste implications of a sweetener change also emerged. While Dr. Mozafarian, who personally can't stand the taste of corn syrup, believes discerning consumers would notice a difference, he ultimately advocates for a broader societal shift. We need to kick America's addiction for intensely, really sickly, sweet taste. Dr. J echoed this, concluding, "It's always better to cut down on soda, no matter what the form of sugar is." These concurrent events highlight a complex interplay between political rhetoric, corporate practices, public health, and media scrutiny. The lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal sets the stage for a contentious legal battle testing the boundaries of journalistic reporting and the power of public figures to challenge narratives. Meanwhile, the Coca-Cola sweetener debate, fueled by a presidential claim and immediately countered by scientific consensus, underscores the persistent challenge of distinguishing fact from assertion in an era of rapid information dissemination. As these stories continue to unfold, they will undoubtedly shape future discussions on media accountability, corporate responsibility, and the critical role of evidence-based information in public discourse. The specter of Jeffrey Epstein continues to cast a long shadow over the highest echelons of power, with the enduring mystery surrounding his network and the clamor for full transparency once again dominating headlines. Years after the convicted sex offender's death in prison, the persistent demand for the release of documents related to his sex trafficking investigation has reignited a contentious debate, placing former President Donald Trump's historical ties to Epstein squarely under the microscope. The unfolding narrative underscores the complex interplay between public demand, political maneuvering, and the fraught process of information disclosure in a digital age. The relationship between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, by Trump's own admission, spanned at least 15 years, beginning in the 1980s. During this period, the two were frequently seen together in social settings, a camaraderie Trump once described to New York Magazine in 2002, calling Epstein a terrific guy and noting he's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life. Their shared presence was documented at events such as a 1992 party at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort and a 1997 Victoria's Secret Angels party in New York. Flight logs from Ghislaine Maxwell's trial further revealed Trump's name appearing 7 times on Epstein's private jet manifests between 1993 and 1997, with flights primarily between Palm Beach and New York, including a stop in Washington, D.C. While Trump has acknowledged these flights, he consistently denies any wrongdoing or accompanying Epstein to his infamous private island, instead accusing other prominent figures like former President Bill Clinton of deeper associations. Mar-a-Lago itself became a focal point in the allegations against Epstein and Maxwell. Virginia Giuffre, a victim of Epstein's sex trafficking ring, claimed she was recruited into Epstein's employment at the Florida estate when she was 16, subsequently groomed to provide sexual services to wealthy men. Giuffre, who tragically died by suicide in April, also accused Epstein and Maxwell of forcing her to have sex with Prince Andrew, who vehemently denied the allegations and relinquished his royal duties. The friendship between Trump and Epstein reportedly soured around 2004 following a property dispute over an oceanfront Palm Beach mansion. leading Trump to later declare in 2019 that they had a falling out and he was not a fan of his former acquaintance. This coincided with the period when authorities began receiving tips about young women at Epstein's home, culminating in his 2006 indictment and subsequent plea deal in 2008 that controversially avoided federal charges. The renewed federal scrutiny of Epstein's activities gained momentum in 2018, spurred by the Miami Herald's investigative reporting that unearthed new allegations and exposed the widespread nature of his crimes, including how he manipulated the justice system to gain immunity for potential co-conspirators. This ultimately led to Epstein's 2019 arrest on federal sex trafficking charges, followed by his death by suicide in a jail cell. In the aftermath, Trump's stance on the burgeoning scandal has been marked by shifts and contradictions. In 2019, he publicly demanded a full investigation into the Epstein case. Yet in 2020, he expressed sympathy for Ghislaine Maxwell, stating, "I do wish her well. I'm not looking for anything bad for her." The core of the current controversy revolves around the Trump administration's handling of Epstein's files. Upon taking office, Trump appointed Justice Department and FBI leaders who had signaled an intent to delve into the Epstein investigation. However, the DOJ later issued an unsigned July memo stating that their review revealed no incriminating client list and no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions, nor did they uncover evidence to predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. Attorney General Pam Bondi agreed to release some materials, including flight logs, but withheld others, notably child sexual abuse material, which officials described as downloaded content rather than videos of crimes committed by Epstein or his associates. Facing sustained pressure, Trump recently directed Bondi to seek the release in court of any and all pertinent grand jury testimony subject to court approval in the Epstein investigation. This directive, however, falls short of the complete disclosure demanded by his critics, a point Trump himself underscored in a Truth Social post where he asserted that even full court approval would not satisfy the troublemakers and radical left lunatics making the request, claiming it will always be more. He has repeatedly dismissed questions about his handling of the case as a hoax perpetrated by Democrats, expressing bewilderment at the continued public fascination. "I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is, I really don't." He has even rebuked his own supporters as weaklings for continuing to pursue the issue, accusing them of falling for a scam. The ongoing saga surrounding the Epstein files highlights the persistent challenges of achieving full transparency in investigations involving politically charged figures. Despite official pronouncements from the Justice Department denying the existence of a client list or blackmail evidence, public skepticism remains high, fueled by the complex history of the case and the perceived opacity of the disclosure process. As the demand for information continues, the digital shadows of Epstein's network will undoubtedly linger, ensuring that this contentious chapter remains a significant focal point in public discourse, continually testing the boundaries of accountability and the public's right to know. In a complex economic landscape increasingly shaped by geopolitical maneuvers and domestic policy shifts, the United States finds itself at a critical juncture, navigating the reverberations of aggressive trade policies and an unprecedented challenge to the independence of its central bank. As President Donald Trump's administration continues to champion its America First economic policies, the long-term efficacy and unintended consequences of these actions are coming into sharper focus, prompting a vigorous debate among economists and market watchers. Months after what the administration termed Liberation Day, President Trump's sweeping tariffs initially met with market jitters, and recession forecasts have settled into a more predictable, albeit fluctuating, pattern. While Wall Street now largely responds to new tariff threats with a shrug, the cumulative effect is becoming clearer. Analysts speaking to ABC News acknowledged that the tariffs have indeed delivered higher than expected tax revenue, with the U.S. recording approximately $27 billion in tariff-related tax revenue last month, contributing to over $100 billion so far this year. Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, projects this revenue could exceed $300 billion by the end of 2025, potentially easing government deficits. Furthermore, the White House points to commitments from scores of companies including tech giants Apple and Nvidia, pharmaceutical firms Merck and Johnson & Johnson, and automakers Hyundai and Stellantis to invest in new U.S. production as a direct outcome of these levies. Morris Cohen, a professor emeritus of manufacturing and supply chains at Duke University, affirmed this theoretical goal, stating the whole idea is to encourage reshoring of manufacturing and change the balance of trade. That could all have some positive impact. However, the picture is far from unequivocally positive. Many analysts caution that these corporate commitments often carry long time horizons and considerable wiggle room for firms to renege, especially given the administration's on-again off-again tariff policies, which have fluctuated wildly. The effective tariff rate currently stands at 20.6%, the highest since 1910, according to the Yale Budget Lab, a figure that underscores the substantial burden placed on importers. While the Trump administration insists that targeted countries bear the cost, the reality, as Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell recently articulated, is that tariffs are paid by U.S.-based companies and are frequently passed on to the end consumer. This dynamic has begun to manifest in rising prices, fueling concerns of inflation. Consumer prices rose 2.7% in June compared to a year ago, an uptick from the previous month, with imported goods like toys, clothes, furniture, and bed linen seeing notable price jumps. Matias Fernango, a professor of economics at Bucknell University, anticipates that tariffs will temporarily push up inflation, potentially compelling the Fed to maintain elevated interest rates, thereby risking an economic slowdown. Oxford economics modeling further suggests that enforced tariffs could dent U.S. economic growth by 0.1 percentage point this year and 0.3 percentage points next, predominantly tied to core inflation. This inflationary pressure and the broader economic uncertainty have placed the Federal Reserve squarely in the crosshairs of the White House. For 7 months, the Fed has held interest rates steady, patiently monitoring data to assess the full impact of Trump's tariffs on prices. This cautious approach, however, has drawn increasingly bitter public attacks from President Trump, who demands immediate rate cuts and has even raised the prospect of firing Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Trump has lambasted Powell as too late and one of my worst appointments, accusing him and the Fed board of choking out the housing market and hurting consumers. The notion of a president attempting to unseat a Fed chair is unprecedented and fraught with legal and economic peril. Legal and policy experts largely agree that Trump lacks the authority to remove Powell without meeting a stringent legal threshold of cause such as neglect or malfeasance. The Supreme Court's ruling in Trump v. Wilcox this year, which described the Fed as a uniquely structured quasi-private entity whose governors enjoy insulation from arbitrary removal, further complicates any such move. Most observers believe Powell would sue if dismissed, likely escalating the battle to the Supreme Court. Even if a firing attempt is legally unsuccessful, it serves a political purpose for Trump, as Jonathan Cantor, former Assistant Attorney General, noted. By creating a sword of Damocles over Powell's head and providing a scapegoat should the economy falter. Beyond the legal circus, the market and economic ramifications of such an action are profound. A perceived erosion of the Fed's cherished independence could trigger a slippery slope of instability, as Jonas Gulterman, deputy chief markets economist at Capital Economics, warned. While Trump seeks lower interest rates to ease finance costs on the national debt, a Fed perceived as bowing to political pressure could paradoxically lead to higher long-term interest rates. As J.P. Morgan Chase chief U.S. economist Michael Farrelly highlighted, historical precedent suggests political interference in monetary policy often leads to unfavorable consequences for inflation developments. Despite the relentless pressure, Fed officials, including former Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester, affirmed that the central bank will continue to make decisions based on data, prioritizing its mandate to maintain price stability. As the U.S. economy navigates this turbulent period, the interplay between aggressive trade policy and the independence of its monetary authority remains a central concern. The immediate future will likely see continued legal scrutiny of the tariffs, ongoing inflationary pressures, and a persistent high-stakes standoff between the White House and the Federal Reserve. The outcome will not only shape America's economic trajectory but also redefine the boundaries of presidential power and the autonomy of critical institutions in an increasingly interconnected and volatile global economy. In a rapidly evolving global landscape, the intricate web of national security, defense strategy, and technological advancement continues to redefine how nations protect their interests and project influence. Recent developments across the U.S. defense apparatus and associated spheres paint a picture of ongoing adaptation. From significant shifts in military hardware allocation to the perpetual challenges of maintaining operational efficiency and digital integrity. A notable pivot in strategic priorities is evident within the Air Force's 2026 budget, which outlines a significant shakeup in its helicopter fleet. According to budget documents and official spokespersons, the Air Force plans to modify a portion of its HH-60W helicopters typically used for combat search and rescue for VIP transport around Washington, D.C. This decision is reported by Air and Space Forces magazine on Saturday, July 19, 2025, reflects a reallocation of resources and a re-evaluation of logistical needs, potentially aiming to streamline high-priority transportation while optimizing existing assets. Such shifts underscore the constant balancing act between modernizing combat capabilities and supporting essential governmental functions, often with an eye toward cost-effectiveness and operational versatility. Complementing these strategic adjustments in material are the ongoing changes in military leadership. The U.S. Department of Defense announced a series of general and flag officer appointments on Friday, July 18, 2025. These personnel changes are routine yet critical, signaling the continuous evolution of military command structures and the infusion of new leadership perspectives vital for navigating complex geopolitical challenges and integrating advanced technologies. The effectiveness of any defense strategy, after all, rests not only on the technology deployed but also on the agility and vision of those leading its implementation. However, not all operational maneuvers garner universal acclaim or reflect optimal resource allocation. A recent MSNBC News report from Saturday, July 19, 2025 highlighted concerns surrounding a previous National Guard deployment in Los Angeles, describing it as pointless and expensive and embarrassingly wasteful. This incident, while distinct from the strategic budget decisions of the Air Force, brings into sharp relief the ongoing scrutiny over government spending and operational efficacy. It underscores the delicate balance between rapid response capabilities and the need for clear objectives and efficient execution, particularly in an era where public resources are under increasing pressure to deliver tangible value. Such instances often spark broader discussions about the need for data-driven decision-making and technology-enabled logistics to prevent resource misallocation. Beneath these high-level decisions and public controversies lies the critical bedrock of digital security. While specific content from Politico's National Security Daily, dated Friday, July 18, 2025, was not fully accessible due to security verification protocols, the very presence of such measures like Cloudflare's performance and security checks serves as a stark reminder of the pervasive and paramount importance of cybersecurity. In an age where national security operations, defense planning, and even public discourse are increasingly reliant on digital infrastructure, the integrity and resilience of these systems are non-negotiable. Cyber threats loom large, demanding continuous vigilance and investment in robust defenses to protect sensitive information and critical operational networks. As the nation navigates a complex geopolitical environment, the interplay between strategic defense planning, agile leadership, efficient resource management, and unyielding digital security will continue to define its capabilities. The ongoing evolution of military assets, the rotation of top brass, and the persistent challenges of operational efficiency all converge on a fundamental truth: future national security depends on a cohesive, technologically adept and resilient framework capable of adapting to unforeseen threats and leveraging innovation for strategic advantage. The coming months will likely see continued adjustments in defense spending, further technological integrations, and an intensified focus on securing the digital frontiers that underpin modern warfare and governance. As Donald Trump settles into his second term in the White House, the tremors of his America First doctrine are once again reshaping the global economic and security landscape. From unprecedented trade deals that favor strategic allies to a stark reevaluation of long-standing aid programs and even a resurgence of nuclear proliferation debates, nations worldwide are grappling with a renewed era of transactional diplomacy. This shift is not merely a return to old policies but an evolution where economic pressure is wielded as a primary instrument of leverage, forcing countries to recalibrate their alliances and strategic priorities in a rapidly changing world. Amidst a flurry of new steep tariffs imposed on major trading partners like China, Vietnam, and Mexico, one Southeast Asian nation has emerged as a surprising exception to the rule: Indonesia. Despite being a significant exporter to the United States, Jakarta faced a comparatively lenient 19% tariff, a stark contrast to the 30 to 60% rates levied on key exports from other nations. This unexpected leniency stems from Indonesia's undeniable strategic importance within the Indo-Pacific. As the world's fourth most populous country and a leading power within ASEAN, its control over critical maritime choke points like the Malacca and Sunda Straits makes it too valuable for Washington to alienate, especially given U.S. efforts to contain Beijing's burgeoning influence in Southeast Asia. This calculated approach by the Trump administration aims to preserve strategic ties while selectively applying economic pressure to induce bilateral concessions. Indeed, ahead of the mid-2025 G20 summit, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto's direct negotiations with Trump at Mar-a-Lago yielded a headline-grabbing agreement. Jakarta committed to purchasing $15 billion in U.S. energy, $4.5 billion in agricultural goods, and 50 Boeing aircraft. In return, Trump slashed the initial 32% tariff threat to 19% and granted zero tariffs for U.S. exports to Indonesia. This deal, reflecting Trump's characteristic focus on reciprocity and tangible wins, avoids risking the collapse of regional supply chains or alienating a crucial geopolitical partner. Furthermore, Indonesia's approximately $28 billion trade surplus with the U.S. pales in comparison to deficits with China or Vietnam, and its exports, primarily textiles, footwear, and natural rubber, are concentrated in labor-intensive low-tech sectors, not the strategic high-tech industries often targeted for national security concerns. This allows for compromise without undermining the core tenets of Trump's protectionist economic nationalism, demonstrating a pragmatic pathway for mid-sized powers to navigate U.S. economic coercion. This transactional approach extends far beyond trade, fundamentally reshaping U.S. engagement with continents like Africa. President Trump's recent meeting with 5 African leaders in Washington underscored a pivotal shift from traditional aid to a new policy of commercial diplomacy. This transformation has seen billions in foreign aid slashed, including the closure of the U.S. Agency for International Development, which provided over $12 billion in humanitarian assistance in 2024 alone. Now, as Troy Fittrell, the top U.S. diplomat for Africa, stated, ambassadors will be judged on how well they support local businesses and how effectively they advocate for U.S. business and the number of deals they facilitate. While Washington touts early successes, 33 agreements worth $6 billion in Trump's first 100 days. Alongside $2.5 billion in commitments at a U.S.-Africa business summit, the continent remains wary. The new policy has been accompanied by steep tariffs with a 30% duty on selected South African goods and a threatened 10% for nations aligned with the BRICS bloc. These measures are already causing significant economic pain and job losses. South Africa's Automotive Business Council reports an over 80% plunge in vehicle exports to the U.S., warning that over 100,000 jobs are at risk. Smaller nations like Lesotho, hit with a 50% duty before a temporary pause, faced the potential loss of 12,000 textile jobs. Critics such as the Alternative Information and Development Center, a South African NGO, contend that these tariffs are not about trade balances. It's economic warfare. The future of the African Growth and Opportunity Act (AGOA), which allows duty-free U.S. access for nearly 2
000 goods from 32 African nations and is set to expire in September remains uncertain, with U.S. officials hinting at a need for much greater attention towards some form of reciprocity.
This leaves African nations in a precarious position, caught between Washington's transactional demands and China's expanding influence, which includes plans to grant duty-free market access to 53 African nations. As economist Brendan Verster of Oxford Economics Africa warns, the aid-to-trade stance risks leaving Africa behind once the U.S. has gotten what it wanted, which will probably be critical minerals. Perhaps nowhere are the implications of Trump's transactional presidency felt more acutely than in the realm of global security, particularly regarding nuclear non-proliferation. South Korea is currently embroiled in an intensifying debate over acquiring its own nuclear weapons. A discussion fueled by North Korea's rapidly advancing capabilities and persistent doubts about the reliability of U.S. extended deterrence under a new Trump administration. President Yoon Suk-yeol's January 2023 suggestion that South Korea might consider developing nuclear weapons if North Korean threats became more serious underscored deep-seated anxieties. Pyongyang's efforts to acquire a credible second strike capability, including mobile ICBMs and a growing arsenal of short-range weapons, have significantly heightened Seoul's vulnerability. Despite South Korea's three-axis strategy, combining preemptive strikes, retaliatory deterrence, and missile defense, conventional deterrence is deemed insufficient against a nuclear-armed adversary. The Biden administration had worked to reassure Seoul through initiatives like the April 2023 Washington Declaration and the Nuclear Consultative Group, promising a swift, overwhelming, and decisive response to any North Korean nuclear attack. However, Trump's return to office has reignited skepticism. His past criticisms of U.S. defense commitments, demands for greater financial contributions from allies, and unpredictable diplomatic overtures to Kim Jong-un during his first term had already eroded confidence. Now fresh comments from Trump criticizing the October 2024 agreement on U.S. troop deployment in Korea, labeling Seoul a money machine, further compound these concerns. Public opinion in South Korea strongly favors an independent nuclear program, with 60 to 70% support even when informed of potential international sanctions and isolation. Yet the path to nuclearization is fraught with obstacles. Withdrawing from the Non-Proliferation Treaty (NPT) would risk fracturing the alliance with the U.S., triggering automatic sanctions under U.S. domestic legislation like the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Act of 1978. And incurring severe economic and technological repercussions due to South Korea's deep integration into the global economy. While some advisors might tolerate a South Korean nuclear program if it reduces Washington's defense burden, the consensus among elites remains that the costs are immense. The unfolding second Trump presidency marks a challenging new chapter in international relations, where economic policy is increasingly weaponized to achieve both economic and strategic goals. As the Indo-Pacific grapples with strategic realignments and Africa navigates a shift from aid to commercial diplomacy, the underlying theme is a global pivot towards transactional engagement. Nations are now compelled to demonstrate tangible value and make direct concessions to secure favorable treatment or avoid punitive measures. This era demands strategic adaptability over multilateral loyalty, forcing countries to craft bespoke bargains rather than relying on established norms. For Southeast Asia, Africa, and beyond, the coming years will be defined by how effectively mid-sized powers can leverage their strategic assets and economic incentives to navigate this unpredictable landscape, where the language of deals, not doctrine, reigns supreme.